with the music on, wishing I was somewhere else, taking all your anger out on.
Hello everyone, it is your host, Reviews Kingdom here, back at it again with another review. And before I start this review, I just want to take this time to apologize for the lack of uploads as of lately. If you haven't noticed, there's been like a 1 to 2 week gap where I haven't exactly been uploading videos, and I do want to apologize for that because I haven't been able to make these reviews because I've been super busy lately, and I don't have enough time to dedicate myself to these reviews as of lately. But I hope to keep making more, and I hope that the gaps won't get any longer. But fear not, people, this does not exactly mean that I'm throwing in the towel just yet. Because as mentioned back in January, this is the year of Reviews Kingdom, and my New Year's resolution is still going pretty strong to this day, and god damn it, I want to keep it that way. So I am going to keep making these reviews until my body burns up of exhaustion. But regardless of that, in this review, we're going back on down to the Skillet Retrospective to help me get me back into the swing of things. And in all retrospective, that sounds like a terrible idea, but hey, it's going to help me get back into the swing of things, so hey, why not go back down to the Skillet Retrospective? In the last edition of the Retrospective, we took a look at the album Alien Youth, and suffice to say, it was the best thing that Skillet has ever put out at that point. It was a pretty decent album. It wasn't really anything remarkable, but for Skillet standards, it was pretty top tier at that point. But in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the 5th studio album, Collide, and we're going to see if Skillet improves their craft or if they're still going to stay the same old Skillet. So, without further ado, without wasting any more time, let's go into Skillet's Collide. Now, in the last edition of the Retrospective, we took a look at the 4th studio album, Alien Youth. To catch you up to speed on my thoughts on the album, it was actually pretty decent. I don't think it's anything you desperately need to listen to, but overall, I came out very pleased for the most part, as my expectations got exceeded for the most part. Tracks like Vapor and Eating Me Away showed the band going in a different direction tonally, and it gave me even more hope for the future of the rest of the Retrospective. Now fast forward to 2003, and Skillet has yet another album on their hands. This time around, the album is named Collide. This is the 5th installment of the Skillet Retrospective, and it's what I'm going to be covering today. What's interesting about the release of this album is that the album released in 2003 with a total of 10 tracks, which is the same as the self-titled album, but come time for 2004, the album re-releases with a bonus track entitled Open Wounds. I'm not too certain why this album originally released without it, but I guess it is what it is. Also, I guess this means I'm celebrating the album's 20th anniversary, in which technicality is on my side once again. But anyways, enough rambling, let's get into the album already. As I mentioned before, the previous album, Alien Youth, saw Skillet going in a slightly different direction. The band was still very much industrial rock/metal, but they were going for a much more grittier and rough sound that made their darker lyrics in songs like Eating Me Away and Vapor stand out. Of course, it was still very much a Skillet album, and of course that means it was going to have some lyrical cheese and corniness, but hey, at least it was a little bit of change. Now as for Collide, the tone gets even heavier and even grittier as this album goes full alternative metal. Yes, that's right, Skillet decided to ditch the industrial metal sound in favor of a more alternative sound. I mean, to be fair, this was in 2003 and genres like nu metal were dominating the radio charts, so it makes a great deal of sense for Skillet to try and get with the times and go in this rougher direction. And given Skillet's track record with previous albums on this retrospective, you'd expect this to be another underwhelming and uneven album, but that's actually not the case at all. I really dig this tone a lot more as the album is pretty consistent with its themes and ideas. It's a more personal side of Skillet, and for what it's worth, the band does a solid job at creating an album that's pretty effective. Yeah, this is still a Skillet album, so you still have cheesy moments, but this album can get pretty dark for Skillet at times, with tracks like Open Wounds, Fingernails, and Imperfection, just to name a few. And now for the burning question in the back of my head, has John Cooper as a vocalist improved? And well, I'm happy to report that yes, Mr. John Cooper himself has improved ever so slightly. Since this album is rougher in production and in tone, John Cooper gives off a very fitting performances that matches up with the more personal and introspective lyrics. He's very loud and abrasive, and more so than usual, and he balances it out with the more believable and softer side to him as a vocalist. His voice is very raspy and scratchy, and I think that this is John Cooper when he's at his best, when he actually uses his talent to make him stand out and feel dynamic and range. He sounds genuine, and his vocal melodies can be downright catchy at times. Now, bass-wise, I can't really say that John Cooper's improved a lot. But to give credit where credit is due, the bass work is a bit more present in this album as opposed to his bass work feeling programmed into the mix of the previous three albums. It's nothing memorable, but the song Imperfection shows that when John Cooper tries, he can actually create something above average. Also, his screams can be a bit much at times. I think Forsaken is a perfect example of this. While not an awful track, it's really not a great one nor a great start to the album. Also, for whatever reason, the song Energy just always irked me. I have no idea why, but it's a track that really just feels like it was slapped on at last minute, and John Cooper tries his best, but ultimately it just sounds like he phoned it in. So yeah, while John isn't a great vocalist nor a great bassist, Collide shows that when John Cooper tries, he can pull off being a great vocalist pretty solidly. And to add on top of all this improvement, the instrumentation has almost completely ditched the more industrial sound as mentioned before. There are some keyboards that play in some songs, but make no mistake, this is Skillet's take on the alt-metal genre, and it's actually not as bad as you might think. At times, the choruses and melodies sound like they're borrowing heavily from their contemporaries. For example, the title track Collide bears a striking resemblance to Linkin Park's Numb. Maybe it's just me, but I can't shake off that feeling. But aside from wearing their inspirations heavily on their sleeves at times, the rest of the band are pretty well in each of their respective roles. Lori Peters does great with drums, as she just brings so much life with their drum patterns and her beats. It's really great stuff. Ben Kasica brings in some really good melodies and some really good riffs, and Corey on keyboards does well in selling the alt-metal tone that they were going for. Usually the instrumentation is always a positive when it comes to Skillet, at least it's one of the better parts of Skillet as a band, and I'm glad to say that they kinda abandoned the industrial metal act because it really just didn't fit with Skillet as a whole, and while they weren't perfect, I would say they did a good job with this overall. And now for the lyrical department. And this is something that's usually the worst thing about all these albums that I've reviewed so far. And you're probably expecting me to say that that's not the case with this album when, well, unfortunately, it's still the worst part about this album. Ben can shred as much as he wants and Lori can drums to our heart content, but the songwriting can really hurt these songs' chances. But while the lyrics are the worst part about almost every Skillet album, this album does have a few shining moments, the biggest one undoubtedly being Open Wounds. This song is probably the best song that Skillet has ever created up to this point. The song is a very personal one about John's relationship with his abusive father and how much he's left a lasting impact on John. It's a very vulnerable and personal song, and I've got to commend Skillet for making a song like this. The Christian genre is known for being very optimistic and very safe, and believing that God will solve any problem. But this song shows a side in which John is not afraid to stand up to the cause of his tormented memories. Now, believe me when I say this, people, that Open Wounds is a godsend for Skillet standards. And, well, on the surface, you may be wondering, is it really the most amazing song in the world? And, well, no, I can't even convince myself that. But for Skillet standards, yeah, this knocks it completely out of the park. This song has more layers and more nuance and more impact than any Skillet song I've listened to by far. Seriously, this is a pretty solid track, and it's easily one of the best Skillet tracks. Seriously, this track is peak Skillet right here. If you haven't listened to it already, I highly recommend you check it out, as it's a pretty solid track. But anyways, on with the review, shall we?
Aside from that, Fingernails is also a track that I'm very fond of. A song that tackles themes of wanting to accomplish your dreams, but falling short. It's edgy, sure, but it's a stark reminder that sometimes you just fall through and it's hard to get back up. The songs that follows it in the track list is Imperfection, and it all comes about coming full circle to realize that despite our imperfections, we are so much more than what our imperfections make us out to be. Like, goddamn, who told Skillet that they can write this good? But for every Open Wounds, there's at least 10 energies. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but outside of Savior and the songs that I mentioned before, the writing can be very meh, which I guess isn't that bad as it can be a lot worse. It's certainly not all that though. I've already pointed out that I just don't vibe with the song Energy. It's a song that feels so tacky and slapped on. But as for the rest of the songs, the rest are just okay. Skillet have made much worse, but it still maintains its sense of corniness in tracks like My Obsession, with John doing a full-on Tarzan scream in the middle of the chorus. Under My Skin is also a solid track, being one of the best Skillet ballads, so that's always cool, I suppose. I think that this album is solid, but it definitely has its fair share of issues with writing. But thankfully, it's not as glaring as previous albums, as there are at least 4 great songs that make the rest of this album worth the listen, in my opinion.
Wrap up this review, what are my final thoughts on Skillet's Collide? And well, god damn it, Skillet finally did it. They finally created a solid album. It only took them 5 albums into their career to actually make something of actual worth, but god damn it, they actually did it. They made a solid album. Now, of course, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Much like any other Skillet album in their discography, this is really nothing too spectacular, or it's nothing that you desperately need to listen to right now at this moment. But god damn it, is this album pretty solid or what? The instrumentation is nice and gritty as it should be. John Cooper's vocals just keep improving each album. His vocal style fits super well with the tone of this album, and the lyrics are actually kind of getting better. Now don't get me wrong, there are a few stinkers on this album that kind of hold it back from being anything above solid, but this is a pretty solid album in its own right, and it's something that I feel like that I would recommend checking out, as it's one of Skillet's best records so far. Open Wounds is easily one of my favorite songs on this album, if not one of my favorite Skillet songs. It's just such a great song with so much nuance and layers to it. There's just so many good moments in this album that it's just really hard to ignore. Yes, sometimes it does sound like they're trying to rip off their contemporaries in the nu metal scene at the time, but this is a pretty solid effort from Skillet, as all things considered. So as for my final rating on this album, I would have to give this album a 7 out of 10. Like I said, it's nothing remarkable, it's nothing that you desperately need to listen to at this moment, but if you really want to check this album out, I'd say, well, it really wouldn't hurt if you check this album out. So, with that being said, if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in another video. Goodbye.